everyone. I'm Allison Morris, watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening.
The losses that we witnessed today are profound. Dozens of lost lives, homes destroyed in Manville. And my thoughts are with all those families affected by the storms and all those families who lost someone they love.
President Biden in New Jersey there before heading to Queens, New York this afternoon, checking out the mess that Hurricane Ida left behind. So how is he going to help those states build back better after the storm? A Texas-sized showdown over abortion rights, the Justice Department promising to protect women in the state, how the Attorney General plans to do that. And parents, this one's for you. New flu shot recommendations for kids. Health experts warning a twin-demic could be on the way. Dr. Besser is here to help answer your questions about keeping your kids healthy and safe this fall. We start today with President Biden's trip to the Northeast to check out the damage from Ida. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber's in Manville, New Jersey. NBC News correspondent Rahema Ellis is in East Elmhurst, New York. It's a neighborhood in Queens. Rahema, we'll start with you. East Elmhurst expecting President Biden any minute now. What are residents there dealing with right now, and what are they saying they need from the president?
They need his ear, and then they need action, is what they're basically saying. The president has arrived here in East Elmhurst, and these trucks that you see behind me and down the road here, this is a major thoroughfare here in East Elmhurst, but it's blocked off now for the president to be able to have the freedom of movement and also be safe as he does this. Hearing from residents their disappointments, their heartache, the pain that they're experiencing as a result of what's piled now up on the sidewalk in front of their homes as a result of this devastating storm that raced through here. And people have been saying for years that they need some help with infrastructure in this area. And now they're not just saying it, they're crying out, they're screaming out. So the governor is here now, the president is here with the governor of New York, the mayor of New York City, and others from disaster relief agencies. And they want to see for themselves, the president does, and families here want the president to see that this is not something that should be taken lightly. This is their lives. And in many instances, it's right out on the sidewalk, piled up. And in some ways, it looks like trash, but it's their treasures and their memories. And some of them, they can't get back.
Rahema, FEMA approved a major disaster declaration for parts of New York. What kind of relief will that give folks there in Queens?
Well, people are hoping part of what the relief will do is help pay for the cleanup. This is a very costly procedure. While there are some volunteers going through the neighborhoods who are helping people sort out their memories, like wet photographs and some mementos, put them aside, but they're also just tearing down drywall, pulling up floorboards and taking out appliances, washing machines, pulling out electrical power boxes. These kinds of things, it costs money. And most people here don't have that kind of money to just go in and do this. They're looking to see if their insurance is going to help them. Some of them may not have adequate insurance. So they're hoping that some of that disaster relief fund will come in and help with the cleanup, but then also come and help them put things back together. You need a washing machine. You need an electrical supply unit, things they don't have money for, and they really need help to bring those things out and put new things back in.
All right, Rahema Ellis in East Elmhurst, Queens, thank you so much. President Biden's first stop in the Northeast today, New Jersey. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber's in Manville with more on his visit.
Allison, President Biden came to this part of New Jersey and met with local leaders and saw scenes of destruction like this one. This home just over the fence here, this was where the Murata family lived. They weren't in their home, but the walls in their basement had collapsed because of the flooding. They had evacuated. The next day, they came back to the area to check on things, and they say their home literally exploded before their eyes from a gas leak. Their house exploded. It caught their neighbor's house on fire. It's been days now, but you can still see the smoke billowing from what remains of this home. They talked to us about what they have left. It's nothing, a few Hot Wheels. They are hoping that there is more help in this area and more help soon, because they, like other families, have lost everything, and they don't really know where they go from here. Listen.
People are out of housing. Everybody's living in basically whatever you can basically find, friends' houses, shelters, or whatever. And at this moment in time, everybody's separated from each other, and nobody really has a place to stay all together. And it's very not fair that we all have to go through this and have to go through these sacrificial times where can't even find a place to stay, especially in a situation like this, you know? So it's very scary, and I just wish that, you know, the government would come together and make this a natural disaster so that we could actually get some help and actually get some funds out here, because a lot of people need a place to stay, including us.
At least 27 people lost their lives in New Jersey alone. 4 people are still missing.
Schools in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, handing out water, ice, and food today instead of homework. Most of them are closed, still waiting for power, air conditioning, and clean water. NBC News reporter Vaughn Hilliard's in LaPlace, Louisiana. Vaughn, students across southern Louisiana are back in school today, but not in Jefferson Parish. Helen Cox High School in Harvey, Louisiana, serving as a distribution center today. Schools there are expected to be closed all week. So what is the latest on getting power back so they can finally reopen?
Yeah, Allison, there's a lot of question marks here across southern Louisiana. We're in LaPlace here, and that's the elementary school right over there, and it is dead silent. There is still brush all over the place. There are no kids back in school. And also in New Orleans, there's a great number of schools where it's to be determined, because not only is it just waiting for power to come on, you've also got to make sure that you're able to run the kitchen, the cafeteria. You know, they've got to make sure that they have meals prepped, that maintenance is fully in order, that lights are still working. There are a lot of other steps that they have to make sure. And you're also dealing with the fact that so many of these kids' homes were lost, damaged. A great number of families are still evacuated, Allison. For so many of these schools, it is very much a TBD about when those school doors are going to really open again, Allison.
So, Vaughn, we're now, 9 days out from Ida. Aside from the power, what are the biggest challenges where you are?
I just set up here. We're in LaPlace, which was one of those very hard-hit communities here. Okay. And when you look at a neighborhood like this, you see a lot of materials. You see mattresses. Yeah. You see essentially every type of furniture from inside that has been taken out to the curb. Derek is going to come over this way, our photojournalist here, and just show you what one family's setup here looks like. I mean, you can go from the Christmas decorations. You can go from the garage appliances. You can go to the dollhouse and the ladybug backpack. The dolls. It's hard to make a much grimmer scene for a family than this one, because there are so many questions when you have floodwaters that come in. What do those waters contain? And what is the long-term impact of potentially some of those hazardous materials? And I want to also, Derek has been awesome here over the last week and a half. Derek, if you can show the outside of this house here, right? It looks like it's relatively fine off compared to some homes. But when you come inside here, Allison, this is the type of insurance claims that we're talking about, because all of the tiles off this roof fell off. Water seeped here into the inside of this house. I was just talking to the owner. I want to be very clear. The family here, God bless them, they did not want to go on camera, but they said, please come show the damage that they've endured. They said they've now 9 days of no air conditioning, no power, and this is what they left behind. They're overwhelmed here. And if you take a look at just this site here, it's destruction. And there's question marks about what is insurance able to do for them. The FEMA lines are backed up. I'm going to show you one more room here. Derek, if we come down this hallway here to the right, again, the house relatively from the outside looked decent, but this is the bedroom. This is the leftovers here. So, well, a lot of homes from the outside are destroyed. So many others, hundreds of thousands of them on the inside. Allison, they're looking like that. And again, this family here talking to them about their grandkids, their own kids, essentially their family is spread out here across the LaPlace. Every single one of those homes has been impacted in a similar manner, and there's just question marks about what sort of money they can get back in order to try to rebuild this house. Again, 80% of it, they say that they're going to have to gut, Allison.
Yeah, it sure looks like it. I mean, the frame is there, Vaughn, but once you take us inside, you see there's not a whole lot else that's livable, that's usable. The National Guard, I understand, is handing out supplies to thousands of people. What are they saying about the recovery there?
Right. The demand is still so high here for families. Of course, so many of these stores are not open. You may find a Walmart in one town, but the supplies are running low there. The lines are long, and that's where these National Guard members have become so crucial in the distribution of these supplies from the state in federal government. And I want to let you hear from the National Guard that our own colleague Josh Letterman spoke to on the other side of the greater New Orleans area in Jefferson Parish.
Mostly just everybody's in need. You know, these people have been through a lot. You know, the Hurricane Ida really devastated the area, so we're just out here trying to do everything we can to help get them up their feet as fast as they can. You know, the guys out here I'm working with, they're highly trained, some of the best guys I've ever worked with, and they're just going to do whatever they can.
Allison, Josh was about an hour from where we are, and when you go down the main road here in La Plaza, you see a long line of cars, and where are they going? They're going to one of those supply distribution areas here. The demand is so high, and actually just a bit ago, we were watching, there was two women that were driving a pickup truck with two young school-aged children in the back. No school in session, but they're passing out free popsicles, water, and ice cream because they got power back on in New Orleans, and they said it's time to go and help these other neighborhoods because hundreds of thousands of folks still don't have power here, despite this being day number 9, Allison.
Vaughn, I love hearing they're trying to bring some other folks some cheer. A popsicle can go a long way on a bad day, but as we look at the mess behind you and inside those homes, man, it looks like those folks still have a ways to go. Thank you so much, Vaughn. Let's go to NBC News Digital reporter Maya Eaglin. She's got the latest headlines from NBCNews.com. Maya, what's happening?
Hey, Allison, we start in Washington, where Dr. Jill Biden is making history as the only first lady to leave the White House to work a full-time job. After months of teaching virtually, Dr. Biden is back in the classroom today at Northern Virginia Community College. She says, quote, "Teaching isn't just what I do, it's who I am." The nation's largest LGBTQ+ advocacy group firing its president after an internal investigation found he worked to discredit one of former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's accusers. According to the Human Rights Campaign, Alfonso David helped draft a letter for the governor's office that some people described as victim shaming. While the letter was never published and David didn't sign it, the report found David did agree to circulate it to see if anyone would. David denies those claims to NBC News. El Salvador is the first country to adopt Bitcoin as an official currency. Supporters say it'll save Salvadorians up to $400 million in commission costs on money sent from abroad. But critics warn it could encourage money laundering. This change means businesses would have to accept Bitcoin as payment, along with its other official currency, the US dollar. Chinese prosecutors drop a sexual assault case against a former Alibaba manager, weeks after the case brought the e-commerce firm under fire for how it handles sexual misconduct allegations. Police detained him in August after a female employee accused him of sexually assaulting her while on a business trip. That manager served 15 days of detention and was fired from his job after the accuser posted an essay detailing the assault online. NBC News couldn't reach him for comment. And the Madrid Zoo welcoming 2 giant panda cubs. Pink and hairless, the siblings are the 5th and 6th cubs born to the zoo's female panda and her partner. In July, Chinese conservationists upgraded pandas from an endangered species to vulnerable. The numbers are rebounding largely thanks to an international captive breeding program. Allison, they are just so cute. I love baby pandas.
Yeah, they're so tiny and pink. They're precious. Thanks, Maya. Detroit Public Schools surprising the nation, teaching by example with its COVID safety protocols. The district rolling out an ambitious testing program for all 40,000 of its students, plus faculty and staff, as they come back to school today. NBC News correspondent Heidi Prisbilla is outside Priest Elementary School. So, Heidi, the kids are back in class there, and they'll be tested weekly for COVID, regardless of their vaccination status. There's also a mask mandate. Tell us more about the district's plans for the school year.
Yeah, Allison, Detroit is one of the most underserved, impoverished cities and school districts in the nation, but they're showing what's possible when they're given a little bit of money and they don't have parents at war over masks. It is a multi-layered approach here. They've made a major investment in ventilation, for instance. They have universal masking, and importantly, and what distinguishes them from many districts, is this universal testing program. Every week, they're going to aim to test all staff, as well as to offer that testing to its 40,000 students. Now, it does require parents to sign off, Allison, but unlike many other parts of the nation, all the parents here agree that COVID is a major threat to their children, and they're, most of them, on board with this testing program. So every Tuesday, for instance, inside this building, the principal and other administrators will be overseeing testing of the children. It will come back within 24 to 48 hours. And here's what the superintendent says about why he thinks this is going to set them apart from many schools that just aren't following CDC advice.
It's actually safer to go to your local school than it might be to go to the movie theater or to an indoor ball game or even to the store or to church because universal masking, distancing, cleaning, and most importantly, testing. Testing allows you to talk realistically, factually, statistically about the presence of COVID. It's not theoretical.
So, Allison, last year, many of these students were forced into virtual, but the superintendent says they're doing everything they can with the resources they have to prevent a repeat of that this year.
So, Heidi, you mentioned this. I mean, it is so impressive. Detroit is one of the nation's most economically disadvantaged school districts, but they're managing to pull this off. How are they funding it and accomplishing something that far wealthier school districts are even struggling with? You mentioned the unity, which I know is a big part of it. When you got everybody on board, that certainly helps. But how about the money?
Yeah, the superintendent says he's surprised that other school districts aren't doing the same thing because actually they got collectively school districts $10 billion as part of the American Recovery Act to put towards these testing programs. And so it is more the onus on the other districts and the question of why they are not doing it. Detroit made this plan back in the spring, Allison, when they knew, and frankly, all of the other school districts across the country knew that no matter what, even pre-Delta, they'd be sending unvaccinated kids back into these classrooms, and they would have to have a multi-layered approach. So really, it's about leadership, and it's about planning and using the resources that they were given from the federal government and following the CDC guidelines.
Heidi, another issue in Detroit, classrooms there are overcrowded because they've got infrastructure issues and aging schools. How is the district addressing that particular problem, especially in a pandemic where we know social distancing is important?
Yeah, look, the situation here is not perfect. None is. Only about 40% of the population here is vaccinated, and that is a real concern as this city is unsure how many of their students are actually going to come back. About 30% of them just dropped off the map last year, Allison. A lot of them didn't even have computers to study in the first place over the summer months. And so what they're doing is offering teachers incentive pay in case the classrooms get large. They're not sure what's going to happen yet. And then also busing students to other locations. But they say that the name of the game here is to be flexible. And we will see this week how many of these students actually come back, and then they will react in real time and try to move them to other locations if these class sizes start to really creep above about 20 pupils per class.
Heidi, you said it, no school district is perfect, but man, they're doing a pretty good job there in Detroit. Thanks so much. The American Academy of Pediatrics out with new recommendations for keeping kids healthy this flu season as it overlaps with the pandemic. There is no one better to talk about protecting our kids from COVID and the flu than pediatrician Dr. Richard Besser. He is the former acting director of the CDC and current president and CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which was started by one of the founders of J&J. So, Dr. Besser, let's just start with the basics. What are the new recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics?
Well, Allison, just like every flu season, the Academy encourages parents to get all their children vaccinated fully. All children over the age of 6 months have flu vaccines that are available to them. Those children who are at the greatest risk for severe flu, so children with respiratory diseases, children with asthma and heart disease or lung disease, really important that they get vaccinated. If a child has severe or moderate COVID symptoms, they shouldn't can get their flu vaccine at the same time that they're getting their COVID vaccine. So very important to look at this, get your children in. The goal from the Academy of Pediatrics is to get all children vaccinated by Halloween. We don't know from year to year when the flu season is going to start, but that means earlier protection will mean if there's an early flu season, your children will be protected.
All right, so get those kids vaccinated before Halloween if you can. Dr. Besser, we lost you for just a second there, so I just want to make sure I ask you this question again so parents are really clear. Can kids get both the COVID shot and the flu shot at the same time if they are eligible for both, or should parents separate the two?
You can get them both at the same time, and that's a really important thing to know. There are certain vaccines that you shouldn't give at the same time. Most vaccines you can give at the same time, and these vaccines you can give at the same time.
All right, so one visit to the doctor or to the pharmacy to get those shots. That's some good news for parents. Dr. Besser, I have to ask about adults and in particular pregnant women. We've been so concerned about them. What should expectant mothers know about the flu shot and the COVID vaccine this year?
Yeah, again, so important to talk to your doctor, talk to someone you trust who knows what they're talking about. We know for both COVID and for flu that pregnant women are at greater risk for having severe disease. So it is very important to get vaccinated against both of these. But have that conversation so that you feel comfortable with the decision you're making, with the timing of those. It's really, really important. It's not something to ignore.
All right, Dr. Besser, always great to have you on. Thanks for helping putting some parents' minds at ease. You can get that COVID shot and that flu shot together. The kids will be okay. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Allison.
The Justice Department getting ready to face off with the state of Texas over its new abortion law. Attorney General Merrick Garland saying the DOJ will protect women seeking an abortion in the state. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams joining me now. So, Pete, in his statement, the AG said the DOJ will protect the constitutional rights of women and other persons. How do they plan to do that?
Well, that's not clear at all. They have said that they are urgently looking at how they can challenge this Texas law. But, of course, the Texas law is engineered to make it harder to challenge. And so this has been a bit of a struggle for the department to figure out how to get its arms around the best way to do it. And the reason is this. Normally speaking, when the state passes a law and makes it a crime, you can sue the state. But here, what the state of Texas did is it didn't make abortion after 6 weeks a crime. It said that somebody else can sue and make it a civil violation. A neighbor, somebody else that hears about it, some abortion opponent in Texas. So how does the government attack that? One way it is pretty clear. It can't do it before the law takes effect. That was tried and failed. So the second thing is, do you wait till somebody then tries to have an abortion and then somebody sues them and you duke it out in court over that? And if so, there's some interesting issues. One question is, can Texas authorize some private citizen to do something it couldn't do itself? Texas by itself can't ban abortion before viability. That, the Supreme Court said, would be unconstitutional. So how does Texas get to tell a private citizen that it can try to stop it? There's a question about standing as well. Normally speaking, you can't sue unless you have some particularized injury to you as opposed to somebody down the street, something that affects you. How does someone else's getting an abortion affect you that's different from somebody else who's opposed to abortion, for example? So there's the standing question as well. So lots of legal questions that the Justice Department's trying to figure out what to do about.
Yeah, a whole lot of variables here. Pete, I know that the Attorney General also said the department will provide support from federal law enforcement when an abortion clinic or reproductive health center is under attack. But abortion advocates are concerned there won't be any clinics left to protect in Texas. How else is the Justice Department trying to challenge the Texas law here? And I know something in particular called the FACE Act comes in here. Could you just explain to our viewers how that folds in?
Well, that really is the substance of the Attorney General's statement. It's the FACE Act. FACE stands for Federal Access to Clinic Entrances. This is a law that was passed in 1994 when there were lots of attacks on abortion clinics. There were bombs thrown at them. There were attacks on clinic providers. There were attacks on the physical structure, people pouring acid into the locks or chaining them, and very confrontational things on the sidewalk where people would try to block patients from entering these clinics. So that's why the federal law was passed. And what Garland says here is we're going to aggressively enforce that federal law so that where abortion is available legally, we want to make sure that people can still get it. But the point you make, of course, is, I think, an interesting one, which is now that this law is into effect, what legal options are there for abortion in Texas? Not many.
Pete, it is a complex situation we are going to be talking about for some time. Thanks for coming on with us today.
Anytime.
California Governor Gavin Newsom's recall election heading into its final stretch. So will he keep his job? NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki is at the big board to show us how Newsom's doing.
All right, Allison, well, to recall or not to recall, that is the choice for California voters 1 week from today. Of course, this is a very blue state. Gavin Newsom, the current governor, the one facing the recall, he was elected in a landslide in 2018. You see it right here, a 24-point margin over his Republican opponent back in 2018. This is a standard result for Democrats in California. In the 2020 presidential election, Joe Biden carried this state by almost 30 points over Donald Trump. Very similar margin in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. You know what election nights are like. We get to California, they call it immediately. The Democrat always wins. The Democrat always wins in the landslide. So the Republicans, to even get this recall on the ballot, that was a pretty big development for them in California. And in the middle of the summer, when we were looking at some polling out of California, it looked like there was a lot broader support for this recall than the partisan orientation of California would suggest. 2-3 weeks ago, we were saying, hey, wait a minute. This thing might be on its way to passing in California. Newsom may be in some serious trouble here. Well, Newsom's not in the clear yet, but let me show you this. Let me show you the most recent polling out in California. And you can see here, this is opposition to the recall. This keep Newsom as governor. That's what this means. And you can see support for keeping Newsom as governor. Opposition to the recall. It's grown in the last 10 days or so. Look, you can see a number of poll results here recently with double-digit support for Newsom, for keeping Newsom as governor. That's a shift from what we were seeing a few weeks ago. What's changed in that time? One thing to keep in mind in California, there's a lot of mail-in voting in California. They automatically, a lot of states don't do this, they automatically mail ballots to every voter in the state. So, for Democrats, they look at this and they say, hey, big Democratic state, our challenge, this is what Democrats say, our challenge is just to get Democratic voters interested, motivated, aware there's an election. Well, a ballot lands in the mailbox of every single voter in the state. That makes them aware of the election, probably. So maybe that's contributed to this. Democrats have certainly engaged a little bit more aggressively on behalf of Newsom in this thing. The bottom line is the average in the polling right now is double-digit opposition to the recall, double-digit support for keeping Newsom as governor. Things can change. Newsom is not in the clear yet. And if Newsom were to lose in that recall race next week, the other thing that's on the ballot is who replaces Newsom? Who becomes the new governor if Newsom's recalled? And it's not a simple Democratic-Republican vote there. It's an open-ended race. There's a ton of candidates who put their names on the ballot. A lot of people don't know who these candidates are. Let me just give you a sense of what the polling looks like on the replacement election. This is interesting. Larry Elder, he's pretty well known in Republican circles, in conservative circles. He's on TV, on radio, on Fox News a lot. Larry Elder leads the way in the polling in the replacement race. He seems to have kind of consolidated, not completely, but Republican votes largely going to Elder in this thing. Meanwhile, Democrats, their attitude, Democratic leaders in California, their attitude towards this replacement race has been to ignore it, not to have a consensus candidate, not to talk it up, not to put money into it. They have emphasized to folks, just vote against the recall. Forget the replacement race. We're not even going to talk about that. Just vote against the recall, keep Newsom in office, and move on.
Bill Cosby accuser Andrea Constand breaking her silence in her first TV interview since the comedian was released from prison back in June. Here's part of her conversation with NBC News senior national correspondent Kate Snow.
I was really shocked. Disappointed.
What does it say about the American justice system?
That it's flawed.
The Pennsylvania Supreme Court found the district attorney back in 2005 had essentially promised Bill Cosby he would never be criminally charged, though he made no formal agreement. So when Cosby was charged 10 years later, it was a violation of his due process rights.
How can a district attorney enforce a decision on a backroom handshake? How can you give any credibility to that?
All the time you put in. The years that you put in, what you put your family through on this journey, I wonder if I might feel like, wow, was it even all worth it?
I've come way too far to go back to that place to wonder whether it's all worth it or to have regrets. It was worth it. But it was worth it because I didn't feel alone. I had a whole community, a whole army of women and other survivors, strangers, family, friends, who were right there with me.
In her new book, The Moment, Andrea Constand writes that she just wanted to be believed.
Bill Cosby walks free, but it doesn't change the fact that my testimony was believed.
Why did you want to write this book?
I had a story to tell, but also it was what was going to bring me true healing.
She's found that healing in a new home she just moved to in the countryside outside Toronto. For her own health, she tries to avoid news about Bill Cosby. But she couldn't miss this scene after Cosby arrived home. When you watched him celebrate, how did that feel?
Disgusting. It didn't surprise me, given the level of the arrogance and having no remorse during the time he was incarcerated. Absolutely zero remorse for what he did to me.
He has said that he will never show remorse because he, in his words, never did anything wrong.
He's a sexually violent predator who basically was let out of jail.
Cosby has said he's ready to go on tour again.
Waiting for the okay for my fans.
I don't really care, but anybody that gives him a platform to speak, to joke, rape is not a joke.
She knows Cosby has defenders. Felicia Rashad, his co-star on The Cosby Show, she made headlines with a tweet after his release that said, "A terrible wrong is being righted, a miscarriage of justice is corrected."
It's disappointing to hear somebody who is in such a powerful position herself not to support survivors.
After backlash, Rashad wrote, "My remarks were in no way directed towards survivors of sexual assault. I vehemently oppose sexual violence."
Good. I'm really happy to hear that.
Would you speak to her if she wanted to learn more about you or talk to you?
Sure. Yeah, why not?
Andrea is concerned that what's happened in her case could have a chilling effect on survivors of sexual misconduct.
And as I sit here today, I want to send a message to not let this deter you from coming forward, from getting the peace and the healing and the closure that you need.
She's now running a foundation called Hope, Healing, and Transformation with an app for survivors containing research, legal assistance, and a holistic healing program.
I will fight. I will be a voice for the change that is needed. Whatever country, state, wherever I'm needed, I will be in service there to fight.
It's time for The Bottom Line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. The market's back open today after taking Labor Day off, but maybe they should have extended that long weekend. The Dow closing down 269 points today. The Delta variant rattling nerves on Wall Street. It's a relatively mellow week ahead, though, at least according to the calendar. We've got some important jobs numbers coming our way. Tomorrow, monthly job openings are out for July. In June, they surged above 10 million for the first time ever. We'll see if employers were able to fill any of those spots. And then on Thursday, we get weekly jobless claims. Dow Jones hoping they'll fall to their lowest levels since the start of the pandemic. We will keep you posted on both. They had nowhere to go and nothing to eat. Workers rebuilding storm-ravaged Cedar Rapids, Iowa. They were victims of wage theft, an invisible epidemic that steals billions of dollars in salaries from workers in the U.S. each year. NBC News senior investigative and legal correspondent Cindy McFadden shows us how it happens.
Last summer, in the midst of the pandemic, a historic storm lashed through Cedar Rapids, Iowa, leaving billions of dollars in damages across the state.
You could tell how many buildings were damaged.
Yeah, there was another building right there at the corner that got completely destroyed.
Pablo Ramirez hired a group of construction workers from Texas and Mexico to come help. Most of the workers did not speak English. He says he did not ask their immigration status. Ramirez hired the men as a labor broker for Blue Sky, a restoration construction company based in Colorado. Ramirez says he and the workers stayed here at one of the sites they were supposed to rehab. The conditions, deplorable.
They were not rentable.
They were not rentable.
For over 3 weeks, the men say they worked without getting paid by Ramirez or Blue Sky, which had estimated revenues last year of $100 million. By the end of the month, they had run out of food. Royce Peterson is the head of the local carpenters union. In desperation, the workers turned to him for help.
We found out that these 6 workers hadn't ate in 4 days.
Nothing?
Nothing. I said, go buy them some groceries. Let's get these guys fed.
Even though they weren't union members.
We're out there to fight for the workers against unscrupulous contractors. And no matter who you are, if you're union or not.
When Ramirez told Blue Sky the union was involved, he says they told him to fire the workers, who now had no food, no cash, and no place to live.
This is where the guys stayed. You welcomed the 6.
Yep. This is where they came.
Reverend John Grieve opened his church to the workers who slept among the pews that first night.
How long did it take for you to decide you were going to cook them a meal?
Less than 5 minutes.
You gave them the keys to the church?
Yes, I did.
Literally.
They weren't strangers. You know, they were just people I didn't know.
They asked for full and immediate payment. Meanwhile, a picket line was set up outside the workers' job site. The demand?
Pay them their back wages and pay them for their travel expenses.
Facing mounting backlash, 2 Blue Sky executives flew in, agreeing to pay the workers after a day of negotiations, in exchange for non-disclosure agreements. Wage theft victims are usually low-wage workers, sometimes undocumented, who are often too intimidated to complain. Experts say some companies hide behind labor brokers, claiming they never promised the workers anything. In a statement to NBC News, Blue Sky says their labor broker was the problem. The issue in Cedar Rapids arose because Mr. Ramirez failed to pay the people he personally hired, despite Blue Sky having paid Mr. Ramirez for that same work.
Blue Sky says you're the one who messed this up.
Yeah, they can say whatever they want, but they know the truth.
It's estimated over $15 billion is stolen from workers every year.
It truly is an invisible epidemic. Some of the wealthiest investors in the world are profiting from the work of some of the lowest paid workers.
Investors like Dominus Capital, a New York-based private equity firm, which is the majority owner of Blue Sky. Dominus did not respond to numerous requests for comment, and Blue Sky declined to be interviewed. But Pablo Ramirez, who says because of all of this he has lost his home, did agree to talk.
Do you feel guilty?
Yes, I feel guilty for bringing my own people here to have them work and not get them paid.
Cynthia joins me live now. Cynthia, we should mention that when NBC contacted Blue Sky, they announced they were enhancing their existing oversight program to ensure that their partners paid workers in a timely, accurate, and fair manner. But I also understand that the city of Minneapolis is looking into Blue Sky. Tell us what's going on there.
That's right. Well, in the wake of George Floyd's death, the city of Minneapolis, had lots of issues, lots of problems, lots of destruction. And so Blue Sky was brought in, and the city of Minneapolis is taking a look at some of those same issues that we saw in Cedar Rapids.
Cynthia, employers and employees have disagreements over pay all the time. We know that. But this here is very different, and it can affect the most vulnerable workers. This story out of Iowa is just one example of something that's happening all across our country. And it's not just a matter of not getting paid, right? There are other kinds of workplace abuse that can fall under this wage theft umbrella. Can you tell us about that and where else it's happening?
Yeah, well, one of the industries that has long been plagued by this is the restaurant and entertainment business, where, they say, hey, you work an extra hour. They say, no, well, we're going to pay you less than minimum wage. We're not going to pay you overtime. We're not going to let you have meal breaks. We're going to require you to work off the clock. And then sometimes flat out not paying people. Again, sometimes those people may be undocumented, but often it's just fear. It's fear. I need this job. I can't ruffle feathers. I need the job.
Cynthia, employers and employees have disagreements over pay all the time, but this is different, and it can affect the most vulnerable workers. This story out of Iowa is just one example of something that's happening all across our country in different industries, and it's not just a matter of not getting that paycheck, right? What other kinds of workplace abuse fall under this wage theft umbrella, and where else is it happening?
Well, you are 100% right. One of the industries is the restaurant and hospitality industry. But the kinds of things are, in addition to just withholding pay entirely, it's things like not letting them have meal breaks, not allowing people to, paying them less than minimum wage, not paying overtime is a big one, and then requiring people to work off the clock. Think about this, you know, how many times, I mean, most of us have had a restaurant job at one point or another. You know, just do those extra 15 minutes. You know, don't clock in for that. Well, you know, those 15 minutes add up.
Cynthia, some wage theft victims are undocumented, which you mentioned is another major reason why they are so afraid to speak up. But what protections do they have under the law if they're not getting paid?
Well, guess what? It doesn't matter what your legal status is. If your boss is not paying you, that is against the law. It is a crime and it is prosecutable. So, you know, people are afraid, though. You know, you don't have to be undocumented to be afraid to lose your job. I mean, you know, feeding your family is important. People are frightened many times in these situations to speak up and exert their rights. These are the reasons that unions in the best of times came forward for organizing workers to collectively bargain to say, no, you can't do that. Of course, you know, unions, I understand, are coming back in a way post-pandemic, but I thought it was really interesting to hear the union guy who, you know, you might think would say, you're on your own. Their whole union came together and supported these men in their time of need. It was really moving.
Yeah, it sure is. Cindy, experts are telling you that cheating the construction workers hired to restore towns after disasters is becoming more and more common. What's going on? How come this is so prevalent these days?
You know, someone much wiser than I once said, when they say it's not the money, it's the money. There's a lot of money involved here. Insurance companies are paying out big time. State and federal government paying out big time. And these reconstruction companies, many of them completely legit, but the ones who want to enhance, shall we say, their profits find that not paying their workers helps them do just that. We can hope that as municipalities and others hear more about this, which is what we're hoping our reporting will do, that they'll be on the lookout.
Cynthia, it was heartbreaking to hear what those workers were going through. No place to sleep, nothing to eat. It's really important reporting. Thanks for bringing it to us.
As always, Allison, great to talk to you. Thanks.
There have been 51 plots and attacks against New York City in the 20 years since 9/11, according to the NYPD. NBC News correspondent for investigations Tom Winter takes us inside their counterterrorism unit to show us what's changed in the past 2 decades.
A bomb explodes outside the airport in Kabul, Afghanistan. Shrapnel rips through the crowd, killing 13 U.S. troops and scores of civilians. Almost 7,000 miles away, it's time to go to work. The NYPD's chief of intelligence knows that when something happens there, attention must be paid here.
All right, good morning, everybody. John, in view of the events of yesterday, let's get an overview of what happened.
At police headquarters in New York City, a half-mile from Ground Zero, NBC News was given exclusive access to the Intelligence Bureau's morning briefing.
You can see the scene crowded densely with hundreds of thousands of people on approach to the airport, close contact with U.S. military persons. This has likely, over the last few days, become a target-high environment. One thing to bear in mind for this is, they again claim responsibility for the attack. How ISIS ultimately portrays its attacks is strategically significant in this case.
And the focus turns to New York.
All right, so we haven't seen the U.S.-focused propaganda piece yet.
Although we haven't seen U.S.-directed propaganda, it's important to note that there have been some recent releases. This is the type of propaganda we're most concerned about here in New York. It's individuals that could be, in the West, homegrown violent extremists that may be inspired by this type of content.
Chief Thomas Galati's team isn't taking any chances. First, deploying heavily armed units citywide.
We have 24/7 coverage on Military Island at the time. Also, we're hitting 5 or 6 other military recruitment centers.
Then debriefing his network of cops abroad, starting in Qatar and the Persian Gulf.
So the Qatari government has been heavily involved with assisting the U.S. government with welcoming the refugees here at the airbase. Since yesterday's attack, the evacuation was disrupted slightly, but my contacts on the base have informed me that the evacuation has resumed.
And finally, the team across Europe.
Chief Carl, we have agents, detectives, and intel analysts deployed to Germany, Italy, and Spain screening evacuees out of Kabul. We also have classified threats from reporting for evidence.
The NYPD requesting that our cameras be turned off as they delve into sensitive intel. We're in the room because we want to know, what is the NYPD doing differently since 9/11, and where do they say the threats are coming from now? The NYPD says this meeting never would have happened 15 years ago. Then they set up 15 overseas posts. The job, identify and go after the threat abroad before it arrives in New York City.
You know, if something happens in the subway in Paris, we want to beef up our coverage in, you know, the subways here in New York.
So essentially, the sun never sets on an NYPD detective?
No, you know, especially when we have somebody in Singapore and they're 12 hours in front of us. So, yes, we always, you know, and they also have to respond to what we need. So, you know, if it's 10 o'clock in the morning here and it's 10 o'clock at night there, you know, they're very attentive to what's going on.
Quarterbacking a team of detectives and analysts at a secret location in Lower Manhattan, Assistant Commissioner Rebecca Weiner says these types of initiatives are even more important given a sharp increase in plots.
The first trend, which is really important, is a real acceleration. So there's been 51 plots and attacks against the city in the last 20 years. Half of those, 25, have been in the last 5 years.
Where the threats are coming from has changed too.
In the last 5 years, we've seen not just a transition from al-Qaeda to ISIS, which we saw in 2014 really sharply, but other actors like racially, ethnically motivated violent extremists, white supremacists, neo-Nazi, what we call accelerationists, and then anti-government extremism.
The NYPD's information sharing platform, dubbed Operation Sentry, has been heralded by police departments from Boston to Miami and from Chicago to Los Angeles. But some of the Intelligence Bureau's initiatives have been heavily criticized as well. Allegations of spying on the city's Muslim community, speaking specifically about the demographics program. And I know you've testified in a deposition that there were not leads and investigations that led out of that. But I'm assuming a lot of ill will in that community. Were there mistakes that have been made as you've tried to sort through your best practices in this bureau?
I think in the early days of this bureau starting, it was a division at the time, there probably were some mistakes made.
So sitting here today, you feel comfortable, hey, whatever issues we've had, we've learned from them and we're well within the guidelines, whether they be the hand-shoe guidelines or any sort of other law enforcement guidelines. We're on solid ground that we're doing the right thing. That's what you're saying today?
Yes, on solid ground. And when we're working with the FBI, we work under the Attorney General guidelines. So, and one other thing that I would add here, you know, we are a very diverse bureau. We have many Muslim officers from every country you can imagine that work here. And, you know, they are not going to let us spy in their community. So if they felt that we were doing something wrong, they would tell us.
Chief Galati knew some of the officers who died at Ground Zero. What happened here on 9/11 serves as a constant reminder of the unthinkable threats that lurk around the next corner.
Chief, you know, we stand here, obviously a horrific day. We've talked about the threats that the city continues to face. Those threats have spread out and where they're coming from and who they're being brought by. What is it, or what is the thing that keeps you up at night on the dawn of this anniversary?
You know, I never feel easy, even if I do think that we have a good handle on the threat stream. You know, it's the unknown that really frightens me.
A devastating loss in Hollywood. Actor Michael K. Williams, best known as Omar Little on HBO's The Wire, found dead in his Brooklyn apartment yesterday. Senior NYPD officials telling NBC News the 54-year-old likely overdosed on drugs. NBC News Now anchor Joe Fryer looks back on Williams' life and career.
With an ominous whistle and a signature sawed-off shotgun, Michael K. Williams established the character Omar Little on the HBO series The Wire as one of the greatest in TV history.
All in the game.
A stick-up man on the streets of Baltimore isn't someone who might be typically beloved by fans.
A man got to have a code.
But Williams' incredible portrayal of Omar's groundbreaking story won many over, most notably President Obama.
Omar's, by the way, my favorite character.
The Brooklyn native went on to star in other acclaimed projects like Boardwalk Empire.
Bring these people another round on the house.
12 Years a Slave.
We were traveling. We wish we'd died trying.
And most recently, Lovecraft Country.
And you respect me! Get out of here!
Which earned him his 5th Emmy nomination and a win from the Hollywood Critics Association just last week.
What a way to feel seen. What a way to feel acknowledged.
Through it all, though, the role of Omar was never far away. Williams telling Hoda in 2019.
Michael, you know, people, when they look at you, they think The Wire. I mean, that must happen all the time. You ever get sick of that?
Never.
Never.
Never. Why would I?
Come on, I didn't think so.
That's Omar.
As much as he embraced the intensity of his roles on screen, it proved challenging for his life off screen, namely his struggles with addiction. Williams told the New York Times in 2017, "The characters that mean the most to me are the ones that damn near kill me. It's a sacrifice I've chosen to make." The tributes poured in from stars like Viola Davis, Edward Norton, Mariah Carey, and the cast of The Wire. The show's creator, David Simon, called Williams a fine man and a rare talent.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.